Hello, my name is Lisa Carrington Firmin. I'm a retired Air Force colonel. I'm a combat vet. I'm a Latina. I'm also a disabled vet. I've been working in higher ed since I got out of the military. I retired in 2010 from the military. I've had an interesting career, I guess I would say, a challenging career. And then I've also been challenged in my role in higher education, where I work with a lot of veterans. I'm currently at the University of Texas in San Antonio, and I am the military liaison. However, I am the founder for the Department of Veteran and Military Affairs at the University of Texas at San Antonio. So I work with them now in the liaison capacity. About maybe a couple of years ago, I started to really think about probably when the pandemic started. I think that was the time that I really started to reflect on my military service. I've always spoken positively about my leadership experiences in the military and my military career. I served 30 years. And I'm the first one in my family to become an officer in the military. My father was enlisted in the service, and I kind of followed in his footsteps. But getting the commission was a very big thing for my family, because I was the first person to graduate from college in our family. So that was considered a really big thing, and of course it is. It changed the trajectory of my entire family after that. But so I joined the military, and then I had some great experiences, a lot of challenging experiences, but I call it like my leadership journey. So I always spoke positively about my time in the military, and I still do. But in the last couple years, since that pandemic hit in 2020, as I was hunkered down here at home, I started to reflect on my service, started thinking about both the negative aspects of my service and the positive aspects. And with the horrific murder of young Army Specialist Vanessa Guillen at Fort Hood, who's a young Latina, and when I saw what happened to her and I saw her face, I began to see my own at the same age, about 21. And I realized then that I had repressed memories that I had just totally buried. I compartmentalized very well in the military, and I suspect that a lot of women and minorities do the same thing. You have to kind of do that to assimilate to a certain extent and to actually survive and then to excel. So I had buried quite deeply that I had been assaulted at initial training. So I never spoke about military sexual trauma. You know, I briefly spoke about harassment in the last several years when I was doing presentations about adversity in my climb as a leader. So I talked briefly about it, but never really in the detail that I've come to know in the last couple of years. So after the murder of Vanessa Guillen, I decided to speak up. So I started writing, and I wrote an op-ed. And then the response to that opinion piece was overwhelming to me. People started contacting me and telling me their stories. And once I heard their stories, I'm thinking, man, I really need to capture some stories and write something about this, write something bigger than an opinion piece, right? So I decided to write a book. And I didn't have to solicit for anybody to assist me or to contribute to the book. I had so many people contact me that I had to actually tell some people no, that I had enough stories for this book. So I've written a book. Before I wrote the book, though, I started writing poetry, because I really wanted to impact people and write something that would be more immediate feedback for them, for them. And throughout this process, the writing for me has been a healing process for me. For me, number one, to come to terms with what happened to me about assault and harassment and discrimination as a Latina as well. So all these things came to a head, and I started writing. And I've written several poems. The first one I ever wrote was about MST, and it was full of rage, because it was my first, attempt to talk about this kind of thing. And this book I've just recently written and published has two of my poems. That first poem I ever wrote is in there, and then another poem called MST Warrior is at the end of the book. And you can see the difference in my journey, the kind of healing journey, how much I've traveled on that journey, which I'm still on. So now I'm speaking up openly about MST, military sexual trauma. I'm also speaking up openly about PTSD. I'm also a combat vet, so I've experienced some combat-related trauma. And these are things that I never would have talked about before, because number one, as a senior woman in the military, as a full colonel, I mean, you don't talk about these kind of things because you don't ever want to show weakness. And that's kind of how I was brought up, to never show weakness in the military. So it's only been recently where I've been able to really come to terms with everything that happened and speak about it and try to destigmatize PTSD, MST, and that these are things that happened to me and that I didn't ask for them to happen to me. So I've been able to do that. And by me being authentic for the first time, I never served authentically while I served in the Air Force. So for me to be authentic now, it's been like a huge burden lifted. It's also made me very vulnerable. But I never knew that showing that vulnerability would show such strength. So the vulnerability I put in my poetry, I put in the book. The book is called Stories from the Front: Pain, Betrayal, and Resilience on the MST Battlefield. It has 14 stories of veterans, active duty, all the way from the Vietnam War to present day. The folks who are active duty in the book, I use pseudonyms for them because I want to protect their identity. So I think that's important too, because of what's still occurring today. And the stories, although they vary, and they deal with disparities like discrimination for being African American, for being LGBTQ, or for being a Latina, or for being a woman in the military. So, and there's several combat vets featured in the book as well. So I think all these stories, when you read them collectively, they're very powerful. And I try to talk in each of the stories, I try to talk about what people are doing to heal. Are they doing therapy? What are they doing? What are they doing with their lives today? I wanted to show the resilience of all of us. I think that's important too. So many people have these stereotypical ideas of who a vet is, especially a vet who's maybe been exposed to the combat environment or is disabled, so I wanted to really show that we are all quite different, but we've experienced similar experiences. So I think that was important to show. And then again, my own journey, for me to be that vulnerable and speak about things that I've never spoken about and put it in writing. So for me, writing, healing is helping me heal. And it's helping the folks that are in the book as well, the folks who came forward and really were brave enough to tell me their stories. I think that it takes a certain amount of courage to be able to face what happened to you and to speak openly and publicly about it in hopes that you might impact someone else. And I know that the book is doing that. It's just recently been released a few weeks ago. But the poetry that I have out there is also doing that. And I want to thank publicly Uniting U.S. for working so tirelessly to help people heal and to acknowledge what happened to them and have no shame and try to help us continue to heal and help others. So this community that we've built together, this community of artists, I think is really important because each of us in our own way contributes a lot to healing. And you never know what one of us is experiencing. So sometimes I tell my story and then somebody else will come to me and say, hey, this happened to me, and then they'll talk about how they heal. And so we can help each other. So I think that's a powerful thing is what we're doing with Uniting U.S. So I'm proud to be one of the artists associated with Uniting U.S.